we've reached the top of the hour, so welcome to everyone who's joining, and I expect a few more people will be joining on shortly, but just want to welcome you to episode 5 of Peer to Peer, the Unblocked Chat Show, with me, your host, Helen Disney, and I've got my special guest today, who is Pierre Bourque, who's the founder of Blood Flow and also the host of Blockchain Radio. So welcome, Pierre, first of all, dialing into us from Canada.
Fantastic to be with you, and great to be able to talk with you today.
You too. And just to kick it off, it'd be great just to hear a little bit about your background. And I know you have a varied career, so just a few minutes about that and how you got interested in blockchain.
Yeah, well, thank you. At the earliest part, I'm a race car driver, and so I'm challenged by finish lines and team building and the excitement of winning in whatever context that entails. So that sort of propelled me through a variety of activities over life, including politics, where I was a city councillor here in Ottawa, which is Canada's capital. I ran for parliament. I wrote a considerable amount of journalism about politics, government, and the internet. I launched a news aggregator website, which became the most popular site of its kind in the country. And through that exposed me to a lot of what was going on in society at all levels, at the highest levels and the lowest of the lows. That led me into crypto in the early 2012s and 13s. There's quite a vibrant community interested in crypto here in Canada. I befriended folks that went on to co-found Ethereum. I sat on the board of the Bitcoin Alliance of Canada, the Blockchain Association of Canada. I was an advisor there. The chairman of the Bitcoin Alliance, Anthony Diorio, was one of the co-founders of Ethereum. I met a lot of the people there that were there at the inception. So massive exposure to that, total excitement. It replicated those earliest days of the internet that many of us recall with great fondness. And I wanted to be involved. Now, I'm a news-minded person. So a couple of years ago, I launched Blockchain Radio. It's online radio. I've done quite a bit of terrestrial radio in news talk here in Canada. So I'm quite familiar as a host in interviewing everybody from sports celebrities to Hollywood luminaries and top politicians and prime ministers, everybody in between. I like that medium. And so I enjoy what we're doing today too, Helen. And so through that, that takes me to the beginning of the pandemic when here in Canada, but we were seeing it elsewhere, that a lot of society's norms were being challenged. The way we were doing things, for instance, in long-term care, in convalescent homes, in congregant settings, there wasn't a setup for the type of inspection that would be required. It's fine to expect from people on the front lines to do things, but if there's no inspection, how do you know? And one of the challenges there was that people were contracting COVID, and subsequently many of them were dying. And I thought, I wonder how technology might help. And I'll just end on this note that my blockchain radio background has given me a front row seat to interview many, perhaps most of the big wigs in the space over the last 3 years. So I knew that there were things that could be done, and I wanted to be involved. And that led me to Blood Flow, because suddenly I became aware of one thing that a lot of people don't realize, and that is the fact that just 4% of a population in Western society bothers to donate blood or plasma. 96% are on the sidelines. And so the blood products collectors, whether that's whole blood or platelets or plasma itself, are forever chasing donors, but giant supply side organizations. And I came at it from the other side. I wanted to donate initially. And then I discovered that the fact that I had spent too much time in the UK chasing my racing dreams, and it might have exposed me to mad cow disease. Now, I don't have that necessarily. I have never known that to be. But the blood products collectors are unable to identify that in the blood that they collect, the blood products that they collect. So they automatically, if you will, they exclude everybody that has spent over 6 months in the UK during a set period of time. That included me. So I was on the outside looking in. So I said, all right, what can I do? Technology is where we are. So that's how Blood Flow started.
It's really interesting. I mean, first of all, you're definitely the first racing car driver we've had on the show. So that's a world exclusive for the chat show. But I'm really interested in what you've just said, because I know that any of us who've tried to donate blood in the past have experienced similar things. I remember I used to donate regularly, but then if you'd been to certain countries in the world, you were automatically excluded from donating just because those countries might have particular diseases at the time, and or be more likely to be exposed to something. So, I think if you'd been to Thailand or if you'd been to some of the South American countries, you were not allowed to donate. So for quite a few years where I was traveling a lot, I wasn't able to donate blood, even though I really wanted to. So I guess my question is how does blockchain come into that? I mean, I guess you're talking about being able to track the kind of chain of activity that goes on with someone's blood. Is that how it works?
So in our case, we're all about incentivizing the donor. What will it take to make the donor want to donate in the first place? Tell their friends and family and workmates to do so as well. In other words, expand the donor base itself, and then expand the number of times that the average donor will donate. As it stands now, as I said, 4% will donate. At best, most people will donate once in their lifetime. They figure, all right, that's a bucket list item. Phew, I don't have to do that anymore because I can say I've done it. And there's an expression, people will say, hey, do you want to do this thing or this unsavory thing or this unsavory thing? And people will say, I'd rather donate blood. It's not top of mind as an activity that most people will want to do. Now, if you're personally impacted by how blood and blood products can help people, let's say you have a particular disease where you need plasma-based protein that go into therapeutics and medicine. Or maybe you've got somebody that had open heart surgery or a car crash victim, and you know where blood comes in. The average surgery uses 3.2 units of blood. You might feel more compelled to be part of that donation system. Most people are not. So I thought, what will entice them to do that? So the first thing is to increase engagement between the supply collectors and the donors themselves. That means making the donors feeling more empowered about being the inception of the whole process, because without the donor and what comes out of their arms, there is no supply chain. So make them feel valued, make them feel validated in that what they're doing matters. So give them some extension of knowledge as to how their donation is utilized in the process. And that's where a variety of technologies come in play. We've got cloud-based activities in our process, in our stack. We've got AI, and yes, we do have blockchain. There's two parts of our product. The product on the blood side is called the Blood app. On the plasma side, it's called the Plasma app. But essentially, within that, it's the same mobile platform, and there are two parts of it. The first one is on the donor and the collector perspective, where there's that engagement. And there's a lot of activity having to do with compliance and technology related to that, because that has to remain very private. The information between donor and collector has to stay and remain with them. We, as Bloodflow, have no knowledge of that, and nor do we wish to. On the other side, on the donor incentivization piece, we've got game psychology that's built into this. Game psychology is a huge thing coming out of Silicon Valley. If you play Fortnite or Call of Duty or any number of games, they try to understand what entices dopamines on many, many levels, whether it's societal or psychological or cerebral or emotional. And you've got this situation where that type of technology, because they've become much more adept at that, at understanding how that impacts the user. In the first instance, it's the players, but now it's becoming the part of the business in Silicon Valley. How do you motivate clients? And in our case, within Bloodflow, how do you motivate donors? That side of it, that incentivization, we have a significant blockchain piece in that. We may be going into tokenization, but essentially what we're trying to do is to incentivize the donor that each engagement that they have at varying levels will be points-based. They will gain benefits. These benefits are ESG based. I think it's probably straightforward to say that from our case, ESG is our DNA. It really is our DNA. We're helping to save lives here. That's what we're doing. And so that part of it, the societal impact, I think we're all over that, because without that, we're not existing. But on the environmental side, the points that are accrued by the donors with each successive activity and engagement with the collector, that may open up rewards. Might be a coffee from a particular major chain. It might be some kind of funding mechanism that benefits them, that is supported by marketing partners. It may be donations to the local food bank or agencies that are trying to clean up waterways, or organizations that plant trees. Those types of things will all be built into this as well.
That sounds fantastic. And the gamification part is really interesting, because I see many blockchain startups now that are combining blockchain as a foundational technology, but also this element of gamification alongside it, so that you can really start to use this as an incentive mechanism, as you say, for changing people's behavior and hopefully kind of nudging people in good directions, whether it's environmental or health or, other activities that we might hope that people would engage in as a society. So find that really interesting. And from the point of view of the pandemic and COVID-19, for people that don't really understand, you kind of touched on it at the beginning, but how does this specifically help? I mean, what does blood and plasma have to do with COVID for people that don't know?
Yeah, okay, so that's a very important point. People get sick, they fill up the hospitals. There's a story out today that Brazil's hospital system is on the verge of collapse. They have too many patients suffering from COVID, like way too many. We've seen similar incidences in many other countries. And so that's a big problem. When your beds in the hospital are filled with COVID patients, all other required surgeries, with the exception of the pure life and death ones, are all put on the back burner. And as I mentioned earlier, the average surgery requires 3.2 units. Here in Canada, the government announced a few weeks ago that there are over 400,000 surgeries that have been delayed because of COVID. So 400,000 surgeries, 3.2 units of blood per surgery. You're looking at almost 1.3 million units of blood that are required just for the backed up surgeries, let alone the things that are happening incrementally with each passing day. So need has exploded. It's like a hockey stick. The same thing on the plasma side. It's a bit more complex to explain, but essentially, whereas blood, when it comes out of your arm, must be used within a few weeks. A few weeks, otherwise you throw it. Use it or lose it. In the case of the proteins that come out of plasma, it takes quite a while for it to go through a process of fractionization and for it to become a therapy that goes into somebody's arm to either address severe quality of life issues or actual life and death issues particularly. So that is sort of a long tail problem that's coming down the road. But so where you've got this massive need that has grown exponentially, you've got a decrease in donation. Let's face it, at the end of the day, who the heck wants to go into a health clinic with a whole bunch of strangers during a health crisis? I can think of better things to do if I don't have to do that, unless the message is brought to me that it's really needed. And that message is lacking. Yes, the average collector agency, private side for plasma in the United States, public side for most blood products collectors around the world, spend millions and millions of dollars, euros, pounds a year trying to entice people to come in. But donations are actually down, in some instances, as much as 25% over the last year. So before pandemic, pre-pandemic, not enough product to begin with. Post-pandemic or during the pandemic, a heck of a lot less.
Yeah, that's quite scary. And I want to come back to you at the end and ask you about your future plans. But I just wanted to kind of talk a little bit more about Canada and the blockchain healthcare scene there, because my company Unblocked has been running a regular annual healthcare event for the last few years called Healthcare Unblocked. And we try to gather together a community of blockchain healthcare companies. And I know, as you said at the beginning, blockchain has been quite vibrant in Canada. Obviously, the founders of Ethereum, Vitalik Buterin and Anthony DiIulio and others are Canadian by background. How is the kind of blockchain healthcare scene there? Is it as vibrant as the sort of the crypto scene and the rest of what's going on?
Well, thank you. I'm very proud, actually, as a Canadian, to know that we've been at the forefront of many, many areas of development. In the first instance, look, Bitcoin as a phenomenon only came into the public conscience here in Canada, late 2017. But during that period of time, and this is like 4.5 years post the birth of Ethereum, a lot of the people involved in those early stages of Bitcoin and Ethereum adoption, the evangelists, and I think that's what we were doing when I was on the board of the Bitcoin Alliance, is talking to people. We had members of our board that attended Canadian Senate hearings in Parliament to talk about it, the phenomenon. And it was really an etch-a-sketch system. So the learning curve, look, politicians at their best are distracted by all manner of things, let alone the squeaky wheel du jour of whatever happens to be the salient issue that they're tackling on any given day. The learning curve has been long and strong. Here, the Royal Canadian Mint in 7-8 years ago had expressed an interest in creating a digital coin, and they created the Mint chip. They abandoned that and they sold that off. But the interest has been there. So on the government side, I guess what I'm saying is that there's huge interest to apply and deploy blockchain on all fronts. On the population side, these last I'd say the last 8 months or so, with the growth of Bitcoin, it seems that interest from the public grows. That means that the corporate interest is growing as well. How do you deploy this new technology? All of the banks have working groups on this. How do you deploy blockchain? In some instances, many instances, they're very active in that space. I think healthcare is moving in that direction. We're certainly doing that. I think we're on the forefront to a large degree in many areas of ensuring that blockchain's involved in this. And the last point I'll mention, just from a landscape perspective, many of the biggest Bitcoin mining operations are Canadian as well. I'm thinking of Hut 8 Mining and Hive, too, among others, but those are big ones that were listed on public stock exchanges and became, hundreds of multi-hundred-million-dollar companies out of the blue. Some of the first ETFs related to crypto are Canadian and listed on public stock exchanges. Those are foundational because they underlie a discussion about how blockchain, how digital assets can be used in multiple areas of society, including healthcare.
Yeah, well, it's great to hear that. I know also over here that in Europe that blockchain healthcare is developing, and particularly in regards to some COVID-related applications. So we've just seen, I think, IBM announcing today that they're going to be working on a vaccine pass in Germany with a startup there, and Hedera Hashgraph is helping with monitoring the cold storage of COVID vaccines in the NHS in the UK. So it's great to see that blockchain in healthcare is becoming something that's not just a sort of niche discussion, which it was when I first started exploring it, but is now, really being applied in real world applications. So I look forward to seeing more, and hopefully next time I look for people to come to my event, there'll be a whole host of people to talk about real world activities that are going on, because I think it's advancing very fast. I want to just come on to blockchain radio because, you had this idea to set up this kind of rolling station, but some people might wonder, is there enough content to fill up a kind of a rolling radio station on blockchain? And maybe when you started, it was harder, but how has it been, that experience of keeping that kind of show on the road and hosting the show? Obviously, you said you've met some incredible people, so that in itself has presumably been worth it. But what's the challenges of running something like that day to day?
So I guess there's a couple of things I should talk about. In the case of blockchain radio, we're 24/7. We have some live content, but much of it is pre-recorded, so that makes it easy in terms of generating actual content. But we have a two-pronged approach to that. The first one is we self-generate a lot of content, but we're also a platform for a lot of podcasters. And if in your audience today you've got listeners who are podcasters in the blockchain, fintech, DeFi, NFT, crypto space, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to be able to align with you if that's the case and provide you an added platform. We have listeners in 140 countries, which to me is just phenomenal. At first, great to see people in Western Europe and North America, maybe Singapore and Hong Kong listening in. But when you see people in Togo or Suriname or many other places around the world, the Maldives, I know it's advanced, but I'm just saying that they're listening. And it's not so much, I'll take myself out of it and blockchain radio out of it, but they're listening to conversation about blockchain and crypto and DeFi and the rest of it. They want that knowledge. There are a lot of great podcasters out there. Sometimes it's hard to find. You can't the forest for the trees. We're just providing one platform. It's easy to access. It's on multiple disparate distribution channels. If you have the Amazon Alexa in your living room or your office, just ask Alexa, play blockchain radio, and up we pop. Pull it up on your mobile, pull it up on your web page, on Discord, and the rest of them, lots of them there. The challenge is this: we're a mile wide and an inch deep. And that's a challenge for advertisers to understand what we do and who we do, because typically they're going to come in and say, well, we want to advertise to a geographic location, or we want to advertise to a particular segment of society. I think they're still in the learning curve of accepting that you don't have to be in the blockchain or DeFi space to want to advertise blockchain and DeFi community. You should want to do that anyways, because the blockchain, crypto, DeFi community, all that community, especially lately, has made it for money. And so these are people, once the pandemic's gone, probably going to want to travel. They're going to want to those that have done extremely well, maybe they're candidates for becoming private jet customers, certainly on fractional basis, or they want to travel, they want to go to holiday destinations, they want to buy luxury goods, or they want to buy technology. So there are lots of different stratas of that, but that's been the primary challenge for us. I also think that if you're in the financial community, and and I'm thinking of we saw State Street or Fidelity, many others that are looking for ways to put themselves and align themselves with our audience. That's a good platform. But we're early. We are early. Better early than late, but we are early, and so that becomes sort of the daily challenge.
Yeah, well, I think it's incredible what you've done, and particularly the global reach, because as you say, it just shows that there's such a thirst for knowledge about blockchain, and maybe it's even more important for parts of the world where there is less infrastructure, and those people, a bit like people used to listen into the BBC World Service, they wouldn't have access to this information if it wasn't for that option. So more power to blockchain radio. And I know a few podcasters who would be interested in connecting with you, so we'll do that after the show. But just coming back to blood flow, someone in the audience was asking about how you actually make money, because presumably a lot of the partners that you work with are non-for-profit organizations. So how does the system actually make money?
So every single blood products collector, of which we've identified who they are, we've engaged with a significant component of them. We've demonstrated our prototype. We're in negotiations for paid pilots. Every single one of those blood products collectors, whether you've donated and been paid for your plasma, which is the case in the United States and a very few other countries, a few in Europe, and that's about it. But the bulk of plasma comes from the United States. But the rest of the donations, particularly on the whole blood side, those are done in the case of altruism. There's no cost from the collector other than staffing the clinics, having the clinics and all the, the phlebotomist and the needles and the rest of that stuff. They have a very, very expensive supply chain that impacts their per unit cost. But every single unit that they receive, they resell. They'll resell it to the local hospital, sell it to big pharma, or they'll sell it to research. At any rate, every single drop of blood product that they can get, they immediately turn it around and they route. So the more that they can get, their overall sales will go up, but more importantly, their per unit costs will decrease dramatically. So that's where we come in. Our whole point is to raise the number of donations that come in the door to decrease costs and increase sales. And so we have a business model that's directly related to that.
Okay, understood. And so where are you now in the evolution? Obviously, it's a startup. Where are you in terms of your roadmap?
Yeah, so we have a product. We have prospective clients. We're on the verge of closing those first clients. We've got fantastically engaged staff. I think the mission really resonates with a lot of people. The conversations at high levels on the technology stack side, on the client side, on where this goes through next phases. Because like every iteration of software, and in our case, yes, it's a mobile platform, but it has the compliance factor, it has the blockchain factor, it has the gamification and incentivization piece. It has a phenomenal telehealth part of it that I think is groundbreaking. But we take it all to those conversations continue to grow. So, hey, we're only 6 months old. We've identified a massive need. I wish I'd have thought about it 12 months ago. We would have been that much further ahead. And I think that's going to impact people once the flow starts to evolve.
Excellent. Well, I'm sure that you're going to continue to do great stuff. And I just wanted to close by asking you something that I tend to ask to lots of entrepreneurs at the moment, which is, what's inspiring you, what's keeping you motivated? Because over the last year, it's been tough, I think, for everybody. And entrepreneurs tend to be very kind of scrappy and energetic individuals who find ways to kind of stay motivated and, turn their brains to problems no matter what. And obviously, you've got this very varied career where you've done so many different things. So sometimes that's a huge strength because you're not just used to doing one thing for 30 years. You've already pivoted in sporting career and journalistic career, political career, and now a tech entrepreneurial career. So, what is it that's kind of getting you out of bed in the morning? It could be a work thing, or it could be just things that you're doing in your personal life that keep you motivated.
I don't know. This may sound a little silly, but I have a 16-year-old and an 18-year-old. And every time I look at them, I think to myself, I want to do better. And so I've got multiple areas where I'm trying to be better and try to do better. And when I reach, everything is an ebb and flow in business. If you're talking to a client, it takes a time for the client to digest and come back and so forth. So but I'm on multiple levels of activity: blockchain radio, blood flow. We didn't talk about my art. Yeah, this week I launched a collection of NFTs on OpenSea. So
Oh,
that's
wow.
you're going to hear about that. I've been doing that for 40 years. My point is that during the course of the day, there's always to do if you want to do it, and I pursue passion. I think that goes back to my racing days, and so as long as there's that art, that's what I'll push.
I think it's a sense of forward momentum, isn't it? To use a racing analogy, I guess it's some people call it living in an atmosphere of growth. So you always need to be, driving forward to a new goal of some kind. And it sounds like you're driving forward to multiple goals. Obviously, the NFTs have been hugely in the news in the last few months for people that watch crypto, but for the last few weeks in terms of the mainstream press, people talking about Kings of Leon, people talking about the Banksy piece that was incinerated as an NFT, and lots of kind of high profile stories. And even a friend of mine in the music business who I've been talking to about blockchain for years, I sent him a message the other day saying about Kings of Leon, and he said, "Oh, I've just been having to talk about NFTs all day and I just can't take it anymore. Can you come in and speak to people, because I really don't know anything about this." And I said, "Well, you should have been listening to me for the last few years and I've been telling you this is going to happen." But it's great to see that you're actually, one of the creators as well, because that's another whole stream of income for creative people, is being able to make money out of their work in that way.
Yeah. I give some kudos if I can quickly to Bitcoin Magazine. A number of years ago, some of my digital art attracted them to write about what I was doing with digital art, crypto art. I've done a phenomenal series on iconic players in the crypto space, the Roger Veers and the Charlie Schrems and the Winklevoss and even McAfee and many others. So they've done stories about my art, and that's been fantastic because it created a bit of notoriety. But the other day, what really propelled me to do it was the other day I'm thinking, I wonder, I want to research and I want to read about the tokens, the NFTs, and art and crypto, and just see what comes up in terms of media coverage. And up popped the story on Bitcoin Magazine about just that. And when I clicked through to read that, and it was just a very recent story. When I clicked through to read that, it was a picture of my artwork that was at the top of the story. So I said, well, okay, that's my sign to get off my duff and move on that.
Fantastic. Well, I think I was lucky enough back in the early days when I worked for the Bitcoin Foundation, a couple of people gave me sort of Bitcoin artworks, which were, maybe a little bit esoteric at the time, but I felt that they were quite special and people had made them, especially somebody made the Bitcoin logo with, all kinds of stuff embedded into it. And I just thought, this is such a creative community. It's not just creative on the tech side, but it's creative in a more general sense, how we reinvent society, but also how we actually produce beautiful things and how we, take ownership of those things. And if we want to pass them on to other people, this is now something completely new and different that we've not been able to do before. So it's really exciting. So
yeah, if I could just leave one last thought, Helen, I know we're coming up against your clock. For people listening, think about what we said earlier about those early days of the internet and the excitement about that, or the early day crypto that continue now, and the excitement around that, the excitement around DeFi. I think NFT is going to have that equal level of excitement that's going to continue. I think NFTs will have a significant impact in how intellectual property is paid for and utilized. So wait for that to happen. Right now we're talking art and NBA Top Shots and those types of things that get into the public mind. But business application for NFT is going to be massive.
Yeah, absolutely enormous. And in fact, this is the kind of the third circle of where things I used to work on in my policy days have come back to kind of loop round, because I used to work a lot on healthcare modernization and policy, which is obviously connected to what you're doing. I used to work quite a bit on environmental and energy related issues, which has already been something explored a lot in blockchain. And then the third area was kind of intellectual property and the balance between intellectual property protection and innovation. And so this third part up till now has been less prevalent. We did a Creatives Unblocked event a few years back, but the applications were still so early stage and not anywhere near as advanced as where they are now. So it's a very exciting moment. And just the level of people contacting me now, about this, it's got people engaged in a very different way, because I think people can really grasp onto what it means in an online world where there's collectibles, where there's, people are fans of certain art or certain games or certain sports, and you can just see that it's something that the ordinary person can really grab hold of. It's a way of making the intangible tangible, which I think is what's really exciting. So I just want to close to say thank you very much for being with us today. Our next show is in 2 weeks' time. We're going to be speaking to Ariel Volanov about a solution that he's building for provenance, working in Asia, looking at provenance and supply chain for seaweed, which is very unusual. So looking forward to that. But in the meantime, thank you, Pierre. Thank you for dialing in from Canada, and all best to everybody in the blockchain community over there.
Thank you very much.